Daniel sat on the wooden porch of his cabin, watching the forest darken as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. He held a cup of hot tea in both hands, feeling the warmth against his palms. The mountain cabin had become his home 15 years ago after he left the military. He wanted to live away from cities, away from people, away from noise and death, and all the things he had seen during his service as a soldier. The forest was quiet. That was what Daniel loved most. Just trees, wind, and the sound of animals moving through the darkness. He had built a small garden behind the cabin. He grew vegetables, fruit, and herbs. Every morning, he would walk to the garden and check on the plants. The work kept his hands busy and his mind calm. This was the life he wanted. No more weapons. No more orders. No more blood. Daniel finished his tea and stood up. He stretched his back, feeling his age. He was 63 years old now, though his body felt older from all the years of military training and fighting. He moved slowly into the cabin and locked the door. It was past 9 at night. He would read for a while and then sleep. Tomorrow would be the same as today, and the day after that would be the same as tomorrow. This was good. This was peace. He was halfway through a book when he heard the knock. It was not a normal knock. It came from outside, but it was not the sound of a human hand on wood. It was slow and deliberate. Knock, knock. 3 times, then silence. Daniel put down his book and listened. His body moved by old instinct. His hand reached for the knife he kept near his bed. He moved to the window and looked out into the darkness. At first, he saw nothing. Then his eyes adjusted, and he saw them. 2 massive shapes stood in front of his cabin. They were not human. They were not animals that Daniel recognized. They were dragons. But they were not like the dragons from stories he had read as a child. These dragons were real. They were solid. They breathed. One of them moved, and Daniel heard the scrape of claws on stone. Daniel's first instinct was fear. His hand gripped the knife tighter. But then he noticed something else. The dragons were not attacking. They were standing still. They were waiting. One of the dragons was injured. Daniel could see a deep wound across its left wing, dark blood dripping down its white scales. The knocking came again. Knock, knock, knock. Daniel took a slow breath. He had faced many dangerous things in his life. He had fought enemies. He had killed to survive. But he had also learned to read a situation. These dragons were not here to hurt him. They were here because they needed something. They were here because they were desperate. He moved to the door and opened it. The 2 dragons stood before him, large enough that their heads reached the roof of the porch. Their scales were white, almost glowing in the darkness. Their eyes were gold and held intelligence. These were not animals. These were thinking beings. Daniel realized this as soon as he looked into their eyes. The injured dragon made a sound. It was not a roar. It was more like a long, sad cry. The other dragon moved closer to Daniel. It lowered its head, and Daniel felt something strange happen in his mind. Not pain, not fear. It was like a voice speaking directly into his thoughts. Help us, please. We are hunted. We are dying. You are our last choice. Daniel blinked. He had heard words, but the dragon had not opened its mouth to speak them. The voice was in his mind, clear and desperate. Come inside, Daniel said. Before someone sees you. The dragons moved into the cabin slowly. They had to bend their long necks to fit through the doorway. Once inside, they seemed to take up all the space in the small room. Daniel could feel the heat from their bodies. He could smell something like metal and smoke. Daniel moved to his medical supplies. He kept a small kit for treating cuts and injuries from his work in the garden. It was not much, but it was something. He approached the injured dragon carefully, moving slowly so the dragon would not think he was a threat. The injured dragon did not move away. Daniel examined the wound. It was deep, but it did not seem to be poisoned or infected. He cleaned it with water and cloth, then covered it with bandages. The dragon made soft sounds, like a being in pain who was grateful for help. When Daniel finished, he sat down on his bed. Both dragons were looking at him. One of them spoke again, the voice in his mind clear and strong. "My name is Kayla. This is my brother Oren. We have traveled a long way to find you. We know who you are. We know what you did in the past. We know you can help us." Daniel looked at the two dragons. He thought about his quiet life in the mountains. He thought about his garden and his books and his tea. He thought about the last 15 years of peace. "Why me?" he asked. "Because you are human," Kayla said. "Because your kind chooses to help even when they do not have to. Because long ago, your ancestor showed mercy when he could have chosen power. And we believe you will do the same." Daniel stood up and looked at the dragons. He could send them away. He could close his door and go back to his book and his tea and his quiet life. No one would blame him. He had done enough. He had fought enough. He had earned his rest. But he looked at the wound he had just bandaged. He looked at the fear in Kayla's gold eyes. He looked at Oren, who was trembling from exhaustion and pain. "Tell me what happened," Daniel said. "Tell me everything, and then I will decide if I can help you." Kayla and Oren settled onto the floor of the cabin. Daniel made more tea and sat down to listen. As the dragons told their story, he understood that his quiet life in the mountains was over. Something larger had arrived at his door. Something that would change everything. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. The forest was no longer quiet. Two dragons and one old human sat together in a small cabin on a mountainside, and a new story was beginning. The morning sun came through the cabin windows, and Daniel made breakfast. He cooked eggs from the chickens he kept behind the cabin, and sliced bread he had baked the day before. Kayla and Oren did not eat the food, but they watched him prepare it with interest. Dragons, they explained through their thoughts, ate meat and minerals from the earth. But they had not eaten for 3 days, and they were too weak and injured to hunt. Daniel took several frozen portions of meat from his cold storage and heated them over the fire. The dragons ate slowly, carefully, like beings who were afraid the food might disappear. When they finished, they seemed stronger. Oren's eyes were brighter. Kayla moved her injured wing slightly, testing it. Daniel sat across from them on the floor of his cabin. He had made coffee for himself. The cabin was small, and with 2 large dragons inside, it felt even smaller. But Daniel did not feel trapped. He felt something else. A purpose. "Tell me your names again," Daniel said. "And tell me where you come from." Kayla was the first to speak through her thoughts. Her mental voice was calm and clear, unlike the rough voice of her brother Oren. "We are from a world called," Thela said. "It is in the outer territories of the galaxy, far from the human worlds. Our kind has lived there for over 10,000 years. We are not warriors. We never have been. We are artists, philosophers, healers, and teachers. We create music and paintings and sculptures. We study the nature of consciousness and the meaning of existence. We live long lives, very long. We are peaceful beings." Daniel nodded. He could understand a species that chose peace over war. He had spent most of his life doing the opposite, and it had cost him much. 3 years ago, Kayla continued, explorers from the Collective Council came to our world. The Collective Council is a large government made up of many species. They control much of the galaxy. At first, we were glad to meet them. We thought they wanted to share knowledge and culture with us. We welcomed them to our cities. We showed them our art and philosophy. We shared our music. Aaron moved forward, his thought voice angry and sharp. But they lied, Aaron said. They came to study us. They took samples of our blood. They examined us. And they discovered something about our kind that we ourselves did not fully understand. Our blood contains a rare element. An element that can unlock hidden abilities in other species. Abilities of the mind. Abilities that could give power to those who drank our blood or received it through medicine. Daniel leaned forward. This was important. This was the reason the dragons were here, hunted and wounded. They wanted to use your blood. Daniel said. Yes, Kayla said. The council came back with soldiers. They demanded that we surrender all of our kind to them. They said the element in our blood could help many species. They said it was for the good of the galaxy. They said we had a responsibility to share this gift. But they were lying. They wanted to weaponize it. They wanted to create soldiers and workers and slaves with power that could be controlled. Aaron continued the story. When our leaders refused, they were arrested. Our people were threatened. We were told that if we did not cooperate, our entire civilization would be destroyed. Daniel could feel the rage in Aaron's thoughts, hot and sharp. Kayla and Aaron had run. They had escaped from Thelos with the help of a few loyal friends. They had traveled from planet to planet, hiding, moving in the darkness. They had heard stories about humans. They had heard that humans were strange among the species of the galaxy. They had heard that humans protected the weak instead of enslaving them. They had heard that humans sometimes chose death before betrayal. How did you know to find me? Daniel asked. We searched the old records, Kayla said. Records from hundreds of years ago. We found information about a human named David Stone. He was a scientist and a soldier. A very high rank in the human military. He was asked to create a weapon using human genetics. They wanted to make humans into something more than human. Something that could be controlled. But David Stone refused. He was stripped of his rank and expelled from the military. Many thought he would be killed for his refusal. But he was not. Instead, he disappeared. Aaron moved closer to Daniel. He created a sanctuary, Aaron said. A hidden place where beings who were hunted and broken could go and find safety. That sanctuary still exists. We learned of it through a network of refugees and exiles. We learned that David Stone had a descendant who chose the same path. A human who also refused to follow orders that would hurt others. That human became a legend in certain circles. A human who chose mercy when he could have chosen power. Daniel felt the weight of it settle on him. He had never known his ancestor, David Stone. He had never thought of himself as legendary. He was just a soldier who left the service. A man who wanted to live in peace. That human, Daniel said slowly. That was my ancestor? Yes, Kayla said. We found records that connected David Stone to your family. We found records of your military service. We found that you had also made choices that showed mercy. We found that you had helped many species when you did not have to. And then we found that you had disappeared, that you had hidden yourself away. And we knew that if anyone could help us, it would be you. Daniel stood up and walked to the window. He looked out in his garden. The plants were growing. The vegetables were ripening in the sun. He had built this garden with his hands, one plant at a time. He had built this peaceful life the same way, one day at a time. If I help you, Daniel said, everything changes. My life here is over. I will have to fight again. I will have to move again. I will have to remember all the things I tried to forget. Then do not help us, Aaron said, and there was no anger in his thought voice, only sadness. We can leave. We can try to find another way. But if you help us, know this. You will save not just our lives. You will save our entire species. Because if the collective council takes us, they will kill all of Thelos. They will not let our knowledge survive. Our civilization will end. Daniel turned from the window and looked at Kayla and Oren. Their gold eyes watched him. They were waiting. They were afraid. But they were also strong in a way that had nothing to do with their size or their wings. They were strong because they had refused to surrender to evil. They had chosen to run instead of submit. Daniel thought of his ancestor, David Stone. He thought of the sanctuary that still existed, hidden in the galaxy. He thought of all the beings who had found safety there because one human had chosen mercy. "We will need help," Daniel said. "We cannot do this alone. But I know people I have not spoken to in many years. Military people with resources and power. I will reach out to them, and if they are willing, we will make a plan." Relief flooded the thought voices of both dragons. Kayla moved forward carefully and lowered her head. Daniel reached out and touched her white scales. They were warm and smooth under his fingers. "Rest today," Daniel said. "Tomorrow we begin." Daniel had not used the communication device in 12 years. It was hidden in a locked metal box beneath the floor of his cabin. He dug it out carefully, feeling the weight of it in his hands. The device was small, designed to fit in a pocket, but it was military grade. It could send encrypted messages across the galaxy, impossible to trace unless someone knew exactly where to look. Daniel had kept it all these years, telling himself he would never use it again. He had been wrong. He powered it on and watched the small screen come to life. Messages appeared almost immediately. Old messages, years old, from people who had tried to reach him and then given up. From commanders who wanted him back. From colleagues who had moved on with their lives. From Sarah Chun. Sarah Chun had been Daniel's commanding officer during his final military assignment. She was brilliant and dangerous, the kind of person who could see 3 moves ahead in any situation. When Daniel left the military, she had not tried to stop him, but she had stayed in contact, sending him messages every few years. Not demanding responses, just letting him know she was thinking of him, just in case. Daniel found her most recent message from 2 years ago. It said simply, "Still here if you need me." He typed out an encrypted message. It took him a long time to write it, choosing each word carefully. He explained that he needed help. He did not explain why. He did not explain about the dragons. He simply asked if Sarah would be willing to meet him in a safe location. He asked if she could bring people she trusted. The response came in less than an hour. Sarah had kept the device active. She had been waiting, always ready. "Send coordinates. I'll be there in 4 days." Daniel did not know if he had made the right choice, but he knew it was the only choice he could make. Over the next 4 days, Daniel prepared. He took Kayla and Oren into the forest far from the cabin, where they could rest in a hidden valley. He left them food and fresh water. He told them to stay hidden and not to come out until he returned. Both dragons were afraid. Oren especially wanted to go with Daniel, but Daniel was clear. If they were seen, everything would fail. Daniel then drove down from the mountains in an old truck he rarely used. He drove for many hours, going to a small town at the edge of a large forest. He parked at a location Sarah had specified and waited. The spacecraft landed just after sunset. It came down quietly, almost invisible against the dark sky. Daniel had never seen a military ship land so carefully before. Sarah was still showing him that she had learned new skills. Sarah walked out of the ship alone. She was older now, with gray in her dark hair. She was shorter than Daniel remembered, but she moved with the same confidence. She wore a military uniform, but not the kind Daniel had worn. This was the uniform of an independent fleet, one that operated without the authority of any single government. They stood and looked at each other for a long moment. 12 years, Sarah said. I thought you were gone for good. I was, Daniel said. But I have a problem, and I need your help to solve it. Come on, Sarah said. We can talk in the ship. Inside the spacecraft, Daniel told Sarah everything. He told her about Kayla and Oren. He told her about the Collective Council and the plan to weaponize dragon blood. He told her that an entire species faced extinction if he did not act. Sarah listened without interrupting. When he finished, she sat silent for a long time. This is big, Sarah said finally. This goes against the Collective Council directly. If we do this, we make enemies of a lot of powerful beings. I know, Daniel said. You could die, Sarah said. I know, Daniel repeated. Sarah smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had made hard choices before. Of course you do, Sarah said. That is why you were good at what you did. You did not do it because you wanted to. You did it because it needed to be done. So tell me what you need. Daniel explained his plan. It was simple because it had to be. They would create false evidence that the dragons had been found and killed. They would stage a scene at Daniel's cabin to suggest a battle. Sarah's fleet would move in under cover of a trade mission, extract the dragons, and transport them to the sanctuary that David Stone had created hundreds of years ago. The sanctuary still exists? Sarah asked. According to the dragons, yes, Daniel said. It is protected by treaties and distance. The Collective Council cannot touch it without starting a war. Sarah called in her senior officers. There was Marcus, a pilot with nerves of steel. There was Elena, a communications expert who could hack into most systems without leaving a trace. There was Lucas, a strategist who had fought in more wars than he wanted to talk about. They worked through the night, planning every detail. By the time the sun rose, they had a complete operation outlined. It would take 2 weeks to prepare. In those 2 weeks, Daniel would gather supplies and prepare the dragons. When the time came, everything would have to move in perfect sequence. One mistake would destroy them all. Daniel returned to his cabin alone. He went back to the hidden valley and found Kayla and Arn waiting anxiously. He told them the plan. He told them that in 2 weeks, they would be taken to a place of safety, a place where their kind could survive. Kayla asked through her thoughts if Daniel would come with them. Daniel did not answer right away. He knew the truth. If he went to the sanctuary, he would be safe. But the Collective Council would still be hunting. They would still believe the dragons were alive. They would never stop looking. Daniel spent those 2 weeks teaching Kayla and Arn about humans. He told them stories of human history, of humans who had sacrificed everything for others. He told them about courage and honor and the strange human belief that one life could matter. He told them about his ancestor, David Stone, who had refused to create weapons and had instead created sanctuary. When we leave, Daniel told them, I will stay behind. I will make it look like you escaped from me. I will lead the hunters in the wrong direction. I will give you time to reach safety. No, Kayla said. You cannot do this. You will be captured. Or killed. Maybe, Daniel said. Or maybe I will survive and find you again. Either way, it will be worth it. Because you are worth it. And your kind is worth it. That is what humans believe. That is what my ancestor believed. And that is what I believe. The night came when Sarah's fleet was in position. Daniel had spent weeks preparing for this moment. He had left false trails, created fake evidence, and sent out messages that would lead the Collective Council hunters to believe the dragons had escaped toward the mountains far to the north. Every detail had been planned. Daniel stood at his cabin door and watched Kayla and Arn approach from the forest. They moved carefully, staying in shadows. The escape route had been cleared. A transport ship was hidden in a remote valley, just 30 minutes from the cabin by air. Sarah and her team would be waiting. "You need to go," Daniel said. "Now, do not wait. Do not look back. Just move toward the mountains to the north. Marcus will be waiting in the ship." Oren stepped forward, his large head lowered toward Daniel. "Come with us," Oren said through their mental connection. "Please, you do not have to stay." "Yes, I do," Daniel said. "Because if I come with you, they will hunt you forever. But if I stay, they will think I have lost you. They will think I am just an old man who failed to protect you. And they will focus all their energy on catching me instead." Kayla moved beside her brother. Her gold eyes were sad but understanding. She was older than Oren in spirit, though they were twins in age. She understood what Daniel was doing and why it mattered. "You will be captured," Kayla said. "Even with your skills, they have too many soldiers." "I will try to survive," Daniel said. "That is all I can promise. I will run and hide and fight if I need to. And if I live, I will find the sanctuary. I will find you. But whether I live or die, you must go. You must live. Your kind must survive. That is the only thing that matters." Daniel embraced both dragons, his arms stretching to touch their large bodies. He could feel the warmth of them, the strength of them. He could feel their fear and their hope. "Go," he said. Now, Kayla and Oren turned and ran toward the hidden valley. Daniel watched until they disappeared into the darkness. Then, he moved quickly to prepare the final part of his plan. He gathered explosives he had kept from his military days. He placed them around the cabin, in the shed where he kept tools, in the garden shed where he stored seeds. He set timers for them all. He created signs of struggle. He threw furniture around and broke windows. He left claw marks on the walls by dragging metal tools across them. He took bottles of animal blood from his cold storage and spilled them across the floor. It had to look like a battle. It had to look like the dragons had torn the cabin apart. It had to look like Daniel had fought them and lost. He created a message on his communication device and sent it to Sarah. One word. Now. Then he started the explosions. The first one came from the cabin's generator room. It was small, but loud. The second came from the storage shed. The third from the garden. The cabin itself began to burn. Flames climbed the wooden walls and licked at the roof. Daniel did not run immediately. He stood in the window and made sure the fire was spreading. He made sure the destruction was visible from the air. Only then did he disappear into the forest. The hunters came within the hour. Daniel could hear them from his hiding place in the mountains. He could hear their ships landing. He could hear their soldiers moving through what remained of his cabin. They would find the blood. They would find the claw marks. They would find the bodies of 2 large animals Daniel had obtained and burned in the fire. Along with fabric that contained dragon scales he had carefully collected over the weeks. Daniel had planned this carefully. The evidence would suggest that a battle had taken place. The dragons would be presumed dead. The hunters would believe their job was finished. He moved through the mountains under cover of darkness. He traveled for 3 days, moving slowly, leaving false trails. He went north, then west, then south. He climbed high to avoid detection. He ate small portions of the food he had prepared, drank from mountain streams, and moved like a ghost through the wilderness. On the 3rd night, Daniel heard something that made him stop. Military communication, picked up by a small device he had managed to keep hidden. The message was clear. Dragon signatures detected. They were heading toward the sanctuary. The hunters had tracked them. Sarah's fleet was engaging council forces. Daniel moved faster now, pushing his old body to its limits. He did not care about staying hidden anymore. He had to reach the sanctuary. He had to make sure Kayla and Oren were safe. He made his way to the coast, moving through towns at night, stealing supplies when he needed them. He found an old spaceport and broke into a small cargo ship. It was not a military vessel. It was old and slow, but it had fuel and coordinates in its system. Daniel launched the ship and pointed it toward the coordinates Kayla had given him before they left. Toward the sanctuary. As the ship rose from the planet's surface, military forces tried to stop him. Laser fire cut through the sky. But Daniel was a pilot as well as a soldier. He had flown combat missions decades ago. Memory took over. His hands moved on the controls naturally, diving and banking and flying low to avoid the targeting systems. One shot hit the ship and alarms blared. But Daniel kept flying. He punched the coordinates into the navigation system and hit the jump drive. The ship shuddered as it entered hyperspace. The universe twisted and folded, and when the view cleared, he saw it. The sanctuary. It was not a single planet. It was a network of worlds, hidden in a region of space that was almost impossible to reach. He could see ships moving between them, could see settlements and gardens and places of peace. And he could see Sarah's fleet, intact, waiting. As Daniel's ship approached, he heard a communication. It was Sarah's voice. "Welcome back, soldier," Sarah said. "We held them off. The dragons are safe. And you just became the most wanted fugitive in the galaxy." Daniel did not answer. He just guided his damaged ship toward the landing platform and brought it down carefully. His hands were shaking. His body was exhausted. But he was alive. As he climbed out of the ship, he saw 2 white dragons waiting for him. They ran toward him, moving with joy and relief. Kayla and Oren surrounded him, their large bodies sheltering him, their minds reaching out to his through their mental connection. "You came," Kayla said. "You survived." "I told you I would," Daniel said. "I told you I would find you." Oren made a sound that was almost like laughter. Daniel reached up and touched the faces of both dragons. He was home. 3 months had passed since Daniel arrived at the sanctuary. The wounds from his escape had healed. His body had grown stronger, though the strain showed in his face. He had spent his entire life running from one place to another, always moving, always fighting. But in the sanctuary, he found something different. He found stillness. The sanctuary was called Haven. It spread across 7 planets in a region of space hidden by natural phenomena that made regular navigation almost impossible. The worlds were protected by treaties that the Collective Council would not violate without starting a galactic war. Hundreds of species lived here, all of them refugees from oppression and injustice. All of them had been saved by the work of Daniel's ancestor, David Stone, and the countless humans who had continued his mission over the centuries. Daniel lived in a simple house near gardens that reminded him of the cabin he had left behind. But these gardens were different. They were communal. They were tended by many species working together. Beings with 4 arms worked beside creatures with none. Flying creatures helped carry tools and materials. And everywhere there was music. The people of Haven had learned from David Stone that the greatest weapon against tyranny was not more weapons. It was community. It was the simple act of taking care of each other. It was the belief that every life had value. Kayla had become a teacher. She taught philosophy and history in the Central Learning Center. Her classroom was filled with students from different species, all of them eager to learn from the last of the dragons of Thelis. Oren worked as a healer. He studied with the medical experts of Haven, learning their techniques so he could combine them with the ancient knowledge of dragon medicine. Both dragons had been changed by their escape. They had lost their home, their world, their entire civilization. But they had survived. And in surviving, they had found purpose. Daniel would watch them work, moving between the different communities of Haven. He would sit in the gardens in the afternoon and watch the light change on the different, colored buildings around him. He would eat meals with people from species he had never heard of before he arrived. and he would feel something he had not felt in many years. He would feel peace. But the peace was complicated. Daniel was now a fugitive. The Collective Council had marked him as a criminal. The entire galaxy knew his name and his face. There were reward offers for his capture. Every news broadcast in the outer territories spoke about the human who had betrayed the Council by helping the dragons escape. But something unexpected had happened. Humans across the galaxy had begun to take action. They had begun to shelter other fugitives. They had begun to work against the Collective Council in small ways and large ways. They refused to capture dragons. They refused to follow orders that would hurt innocent beings. And they began to talk about Daniel as a hero. The story of what happened had spread through underground networks. A human had stood against oppression. A human had sacrificed his safety for others. A human had proven that compassion could be stronger than power. And as the story spread, something shifted in how species across the galaxy viewed humans. Humans had always been seen as clever and adaptable. But now they were being seen as something more. They were being seen as moral. They were being seen as the kind of species that would choose ethics over profit. They were being seen as beings who would protect the weak, even when it cost them everything. The Collective Council tried to counter the narrative. They released information showing that Daniel was a criminal who had worked with terrorists. They showed evidence of his military past and the many battles he had fought. But the evidence did not matter. The story was stronger than the facts. 1 year after arriving at Haven, Daniel received a visitor. It was Sarah Chun. She had left the military entirely and now worked as part of a larger network of humans and other species who were beginning to openly oppose the Collective Council's policies. She was no longer alone in this work. More and more beings were joining the effort. Sarah and Daniel sat in the gardens of Haven, drinking tea that was very similar to the tea Daniel had made in his cabin so long ago. "The Council is falling apart," Sarah said. "Not because of violence, but because more and more beings are refusing to follow their orders. Because they have heard about what you did. Because they have started to believe that there is another way." "I did not do it to start a movement," Daniel said. "I just tried to help two beings who needed help." "That is why it works," Sarah said. "Because you did not do it for glory or power. You did it because it was right. And that kind of action spreads. That kind of action changes things." That evening, Daniel walked with Kayla and Oren through the gardens. The three of them had become inseparable. They were a small family, brought together by circumstance and held together by something deeper than blood. It was loyalty. It was the choice to stand together against injustice. The sun was setting, and the light cast long shadows across the gardens. Kayla and Oren's white scales caught the golden light and seemed to glow. Daniel walked between them, his old human body small beside their large forms. But he did not feel small. He felt strong. He felt necessary. "Do you miss the cabin?" Kayla asked through their mental connection. "Sometimes," Daniel said. "But I was not living there. I was hiding. I was running from the world and from myself. I could not stay hidden forever. And you needed help. That was more important than my comfort." Oren made the sound that was almost like laughter. "You have become wise, my friend. That is what humans are. You are beings who understand the difference between living and hiding. You are beings who choose to act even when action is hard. That is why we came to you. That is why the galaxy is learning to believe in humans." They walked together through the gardens as the sun disappeared. The stars came out above them, countless lights in the darkness. And Daniel realized that he was no longer the man who wanted only quiet and peace. He had become something different. He had become a human who understood that his greatest strength was not in fighting or surviving alone. His greatest strength was in choosing to help others. His greatest strength was in standing against injustice, even when it cost everything. Years would pass. The collective council would eventually change. Beings across the galaxy would continue to fight against oppression and for freedom. And the story of Daniel and the dragons would become a legend that spread among all the species of the galaxy. But in that moment, as Daniel walked with Kayla and Oren through the gardens of Haven under the light of foreign stars, none of that mattered. What mattered was the simple act of three beings, very different in form, but united in purpose, walking together toward a future they could not yet see but believed in completely. The sanctuary was called Haven because it was a place of safety, but it was more than that. It was a place where the simple human belief that every life matters had become the foundation of an entire world. And Daniel had become proof that one being, choosing to do what was right, could change everything. The quiet knock at the cabin door all those months ago had opened a door to a different kind of life. And Daniel, the old soldier who had wanted only to be left alone, had found something better than peace. He had found purpose. He had found family. He had found home.